Hey everyone, this is Amber Key, and you're listening to a Bright Idea podcast, a show where I sit down with entrepreneurs to discuss the aha moments that launched their businesses. On this week's episode, I sat down with Jordan Polk, founder and CEO of M.I.A., also known as Missing in Action, a Detroit-based hair and scalp care brand on a mission to make the outdoors more accessible. A former investment banker and software private equity investor, Jordan left Wall Street to build the category she couldn't find, a protection-first hair care for textured hair experiencing damage and dryness while living actively outdoors. Missing in Action's hero product, HairBlock, is a clean, science-forward daily barrier serum that supports against UV, chlorine, saltwater, and cold weather. Jordan placed second at Beauty Tank LA in 2026 and is backed by 20-plus years of hair care industry expertise through her advisory network. In this episode, Jordan and I chat about her experience going from private equity to founding Missing in Action. And through her experience in high finance, she shares her strategies for fundraising, building a credible brand, and navigating the challenges of entrepreneurship. Before we dive in, if you love what we're doing here at a Bright Idea podcast, help us keep going. You can subscribe to this show to get notifications when new episodes drop. If you like what you hear, share this episode with someone who needs a little inspiration. And if you would like to support the show directly, you can donate to our Cash App at a Bright Idea Podcast. Lastly, if you're a business owner or a brand looking to connect with our growing audience, we'd love to collaborate with you. You can sponsor an ad within one of our episodes or sponsor an entire episode. Just reach out to us to learn more information. Now let's get into it. Here's my conversation with Jordan Polk, founder of Missing in Action. All right, so I'm here with Jordan from Missing in Action. Jordan, how are you doing today?
So good. So excited to be here. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so excited to be here too. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. For the listeners, I found you on Instagram. I saw one of your reels, which was super eye-catching and stopped me from scrolling. So, which is your job, which is the point. But what I got from our conversation previously from this interview was so much more about you behind the scenes and how you've really been able to, I don't know, just catapult this new career, this new venture in your business. And so I, of course, want to get into your brand, but I really want to pick your brain about venture capitals, about raising funds so that the listeners here today can kind of get some tips and advice from you. So thank you so much for joining us.
Do it. Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah.
Whatever questions you have, I'm ready.
Absolutely. So first, to get started, I wanted the listeners to get to know a little bit about you. So I would love to play rapid fire with you if you'd like to play. Okay.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
My first question is debt or equity?
Always debt. I mean, it depends on your long-term goals, but the nuance, the saying's always debt is cheaper than equity. If your long-term goal is to, retain more interest in your business, then definitely go for debt. It's a short-term solution that can fuel growth.
Love that. What's one business buzzword that you secretly hate?
Oof. I feel like AI is an easy one to say, but I think AI is just so vague. I don't hate the concept of AI. I think I hate how misunderstood it is and how broad people can be about it. And it's usually said in the context of of negative, connotations. And I think AI is just really misunderstood. And I think it's supposed to be a partnership between you and whatever system you're kind of working with at the time.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Maybe AI.
Yeah. If Missing in Action disappeared tomorrow, what industry would you build in next?
I would stay. Oh, that's a good question. That's such a good question. I would probably do a mixture of consumer / beauty and technology, kind of mixing my past experience with the love I have for beauty. But yeah, consumer tech.
Well, that's a good one. Okay. What is one rule in entrepreneurship that you think is complete BS?
Oof. These are good questions. Complete BS. I would say you should know everything. You should always have the right. I feel like people assume that founders always know what they're doing. And if they don't, they're not a good founder. But I think you should be able to fail. Building in public, that's oftentimes, failing publicly. And so I think the rule that founders should know everything and should always be decisive. You should be decisive, but be decisive without, contemplating a decision. I think that's a rule that people put on founders and shouldn't.
Yeah, I think that that's such a good point too, because I think that that stops more people from becoming founders
Yeah.
because they feel like they need to know everything and be perfect before they start.
Yeah. You never will be. You
Yeah,
never will know everything about your journey ahead of you.
that's amazing. Okay, and then my last one is early mornings or late nights.
Such a night owl, but I've been trying to do better at being a morning person.
Okay.
But I'm a night owl for sure. I would rather stay up till like 2, 3, 4 a.m. than wake up at 7 a.m., which is like counter to what everyone says. Like I think
Yes.
I've read the whole 5 a.m. club books and they're just not for me.
Okay, so you're working until like 3 or 4 in the morning.
Nowadays, I mean, we're kind of in the thick of the business. We're about 6, 7 months in, and it's a critical, it's an inflection point. Like what you've tested a lot. We tested a lot on digital e-com, tested a lot now, kind of diving into the B2B side of the business. And so it just requires, I think B2B, and we can talk more if it's interesting to you and the viewers about, the wholesale retail side. And that's just been more of a grind. And so adding that onto the existing workload has just been a bit more intensive, but it's I don't know. I wouldn't rather do anything else.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for playing rapid fire.
I definitely knew I was going to be a founder and an entrepreneur one day.
Now I want to get into some of the questions. I would love to know a little bit about your background. So take me back before missing in action. Like, what were you doing and what did you think your career was going to look like?
Yeah, before missing in action, wow. And can I say, like, this is exactly a year on the dot that I left private equity last year. And so it's
What
really
a joy.
celebratory for me.
Yes.
So before this, I was in software private equity doing like B2B enterprise SaaS. So if people don't know what private equity is, it's basically in layman's terms, buying and selling company for profit. And so we were doing that for like larger scale SaaS, so software as a service businesses. I did that for about 2 years and some change. And then before that, I was in investment banking at Barclays in Chicago. So we did a little bit of retail and tech investment banking.
Hmm.
IPOs, follow-on offerings, leverage buyouts, like things like that. So completely unrelated to consumer. Did
Yeah.
I always think that I was going to venture into consumer and beauty? On the low, I definitely I definitely knew I was going to be a founder and an entrepreneur one day. I'm a strong believer that you have to be a follower and, a good listener, a good for lack of better words, a good employee before you can, lead. You don't know what you don't know. And I think being in that position taught me a lot, even if it wasn't directly industry related. But yeah, I think when I went to college, I always knew I wanted to build something outside of what that wasn't here before, and I knew I loved beauty. I just didn't know what it was going to be. I didn't know it was going to be MIA in the end.
Yeah. You said that going into you worked in high finance. What was that path first? Like what kind of drew you into that industry?
Yeah, I know I'm sound so nerdy, but loved economics from an early age. I took it in high school. I did really well, and so I knew I wanted to study econ going into college. But I was so adamant that I didn't want to do anything in business. I was like, I'm going to do a research job or something non-businessy. And then I had this class with this student who still one of my really good friends to this day, who we were just spitballing like ideas. He was like, "What do you like? What internships are you looking at?" And I was looking at this program called Girls Who Invest, which is a nonprofit that gets more women into these positions in hedge funds, investment banks, private equity shops. And so he was like, well, you should, meet this director of the program at Michigan State, which is where I went to school. Got introduced there, and I had no clue what investment bank or any of this was. Investment banking, private equity, and I met with the director of essentially the program at our school that got people from Michigan State into these like really prestigious jobs, and
Yeah.
like it went from there. So that was kind of how I got exposed to it.
That and at what point did you realize that this wasn't going to be your path forever?
Yeah, yeah. I would say that's a good question. I'd say I really loved everything that I was learning in the career. Like it's such like a you learn a lot in such a short time span because you're just getting so many reps in that job, and they're trusting you with so much responsibility at a young age. Like you're working on these like million billion dollar transactions, and I'm like I'm
Yeah.
literally 23 or whatever, like at the time when I graduated 21, but when I left I was 25 and working on billion plus transactions. And so the intensity and like the lifestyle, you learn a ton. But I think a year into my job at Toma, I kind of stepped back and I was like, what do I really love about the job? And when I took a step back, I really loved the operations and like the analytic, like thinking through like the go-to-market strategy for a company,
Yeah.
the packaging and pricing modeling, the customer service aspect. I loved all of that. I loved the qualitative and like how can we really operationalize this business and make it more efficient. And that's where I kind of knew like that coupled with like all of that I was doing in my free time with beauty and hair care and skincare and that whole world. I was like, this
Yeah.
just makes sense for me to venture off and do beauty, become a beauty founder.
Where
Here
were
we are.
you? Yeah. And how were you able to, I mean, running kind of through your day to day of what you were doing with founders and just in this like finance space, where were you finding the time to do sort of your ideas on the side?
Yeah. I mean, midnight, midnight would come around and I mean there are times, even in investment banking, there's like you send in like your work and then you have like an hour, 30 minutes to an hour of like time to like go get your lunch and like and that time like I'm on my phone like scrolling and like the cool thing about it is that I kind of grew up in the latter half of like this like TikTok information era. And so
Yeah.
like my For You pages, were founders building in public, and it was like beauty independent articles, and so I would just read that in my free time. And so yeah, if it wasn't at late at night, it would be like just the random pockets of free time that we would have to be human.
So where did your idea for Missing in Action come from?
Yeah, I was living in California, and I took a weekend trip. I was in San Francisco, took a weekend trip down to San Diego, one of my favorite places ever. I like frequently just avoided like being outdoors just because of the hassle that a lot of people go through in being outdoors. And so I like spent hours the night before knowing I was going to the beach the next day, like moisturizing my hair, twisting it. And I was like, okay, great. I'm gonna be at the beach, the next day. And so I, I'm there for almost just an hour and my hair is already dried, fried, laid to the side. And I was so frustrated. And that's kind of when I started doing research. I'm like, okay, like I put all this effort, like I'm a beauty girl, I put all this effort in my skin, my body, like what products are out there to protect my hair from me not having to spend as much time moisturizing my hair after being, out. I found like there were the Sunbums of the world. There was Supergoop had like one powder-based product, but nothing that was focused on curls, coils, and waves, and nothing that was, if I was wearing my hair straight, wouldn't revert it back curly, whatever it may be. And so that's kind of how M.I.A was born.
So essentially, you were looking for something to protect your hair from the
The
elements.
outdoors. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It was my own personal experience that kind of developed into this idea to create something that ideally other people would need too. And so I did my own. I don't know if you talked about, we did some like survey research because it's an issue that I have doesn't mean like everyone has it, and so
Right.
that was a whole other thing.
Can you paint that picture for us though? Because I'm a curly girl as well. And so before I go on any vacation, I know that I'm sitting in the chair getting my hair braided so that I don't
Yeah.
have to worry about like the sun or the so that I can swim or so can you talk a little bit about personally, like some of the thoughts that you would be thinking about before going outdoors before you launched Missing in Action?
Oh my gosh, yeah, it depends. Like it's like the calculus is so different when you are like putting your hair into a protective style or whether you're putting your hair into you're wearing it like naturally out or in its natural state.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, like if I'm going like to go swimming as like a workout, I'm like, okay, I have to like be mindful that can I swim today? What meetings do I have leading up
Mm.
to like next week that I need to like keep my hair straight? there's always this like mental calculus going on, I feel like, with women of color, people with textured hair, that you kind of have to like plan your life around, outdoor activities, which is what I was really frustrated by.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, for me, it was like always like, okay, if I'm going skiing, like my hair is gonna be so dry after this. So like how can I prevent it from being dry or going into a chlorinated pool? Like what can I do? So these were always the thoughts I was having before doing anything with my lifestyle. And oftentimes I'd be like, I can't do it this week. Like I can't go swim.
Right.
I can't go outside. Like I really need to I have other things in my life I need to prioritize, and even if I loved the outdoors.
When did this go from, okay, this is an idea, this could be interesting, and to turning this into something?
Yeah, I think after San Diego, I was like, this is a cute idea, This is cute. I like floated it with my friends and my partner at the time, and they were all like, yeah, that's like it makes sense. Like you have sunscreen for your hair, and then I did like real research on the science behind it. Then you get into like hairstylists talking about the issue online and dermatologists talking about scalp burn. And I was like, oh, this is actually an issue that people have that no one just really people are just like just put normal sunscreen on your scalp and move on with your day and whatnot, but that causes product buildup. And so I think after I did the consumer research or the consumer survey research, where we commissioned like 100 people, it wasn't so super expensive. You can do this like people would do this normally, like with friends and family or on the street, but getting the data of like people that will be willing and able to pay for it, the types of products they'd be interested in, like they're without even thinking about a product, what current issues they have. And I think that talking to friends and family and then doing that survey really, helped us get to or helped me get to a point where I was like, okay, like I'm going to leave my job for this.
Yeah.
And which seems kind of silly thinking back to it, but I don't know, I really believe that we had something, obviously still believe we have something here. Um, but I think it was after the survey work and like no one ever told me no, which is so surprising. Like I think people often get told like that's like a really bad idea.
Right.
But everyone I talked to about it, they were like they were aligned as well.
Coming up, the aha moment that launched Missing in Action. Well, what I think is so cool about M.I.A. is that there are a lot of hair care products now more than ever, especially for curls, coils, and curl textured hair. Yes. But yours is a little different in that it's actually, like you explained it, like a sunscreen almost for the hair. We're not seeing that out there all the time. I want to get to like this aha moment, but was there a single aha moment or was it more of like a slow build over time that launched the business?
It was definitely, I mean, so it was the San Diego moment was like this makes like, why hasn't anyone thought about this before?
Yeah.
And not to say that there aren't, existing, hair products for the outdoors or hair products for, point solutions for like surfing or point solutions for the sun. But I think the aha moment that kind of led to the slow build was like, okay, but no one's really catering in the clean, research backed and like catering towards like my hair type and making it usable for like a texture inclusive mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And like it's like a simple thing where I think making a formula oil based versus water based is like so it's like it seems so silly, but it's so important to someone who, especially like Black women, like we wear our hair in so many different styles, and so having a product that can kind of truly be a daily routine for you is so important. So that's the mindfulness that comes from it. But I think after that, it was a slow build where it's like, okay, this is a cool idea, but I think it took really like talking to the chemist, talking to the brand designer at some point, having that survey research, and then talking to my team eventually to be like, okay, this is like now this is the moment where I think this fully makes sense. I can put all my eggs in this basket.
Yeah. And for the listener, like people that have not heard of M.I.A. before, can you talk a little bit about the product and what it aims to do?
Yeah, I should have started with that. Yeah, Missing in Action.
That's okay.
M.I.A. We basically do outdoor hair care, and we're on a mission to enable better, more frequent outdoor experiences, starting with the hair and scalp. And so we only have one product so far, one hero SKU. It's called HairBlock. HairBlock is essentially a daily outdoor barrier serum that protects against, frizz, outdoor scalp dryness, scalp burn. It supports against moisture loss. A lot of what I was experiencing without HairBlock was, like I'd mentioned previously, like you had so much effort into moisturizing your hair, but a lot of the damage that comes from being in the elements comes from that moisture loss, because when you lose the moisture, that's when you get the breakage, the dryness, the split ends, the frizz. And so that's essentially what HairBlock does. It prevents that moisture loss so that you can retain more length in your hair.
And while you were building M.I.A., you were working at the same time. Can you talk about how your background in private equity kind of helped build this product?
Yeah, I think more so on the sequencing of the brand. I kind of went straight for, you can kind of tell, like I went straight for like consumer research. What are people saying? And that's kind of what we did. That was our bread and butter in private equity. We did a lot of they call them expert network calls, where you kind of hop on the phone with similar companies or customers of the brand or the company that you're interested in acquiring. And so I was really, really engulfed in at an early stage of like what the customer was willing and able to support in the outdoor hair care space, because it's like Supergoop 10 years ago where people aren't really using SPF as a daily part of their routine, but now you have people who like are adamant about, SPF as a critical part of their skincare. I think also on the flip side, I think a lot of founders early on are hyper focused on growth.
Mm-hmm.
And I've just always been just seeing so many companies come in on the private equity side, be so focused on growth, and then have to kind of have a really tough conversation about getting like their path to profitability. I think that's what made me make certain decisions about the brand that would kind of prioritize sustainable business models, and that for me was profitability over growth. Although you want growth, but like sustainable growth.
Yeah, well, I found that to be so interesting about your story is that you didn't just go into it blindly. You almost you didn't just start a business, you kind of like engineered it based on like your background. What did you understand about building a business that most like first-time founders completely miss? You talked about growing fast, but are there any other rookie mistakes?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I mean, I'm still making mistakes, I think the main thing that I sidestepped was our product development play. Like I think a lot of people think they need a full product line. And for me, I just really wanted to hit one really great intentionally made, intentionally formulated product, which is for us HairBlock.
Yeah.
It's kind of like if you're familiar with like Magic Molecules, like that kind of playbook where they started off with one really great hero SKU and then started on e-com and then built it out into a really great retail story. And that for me, which I feel like a lot of founders just feel like they need to like push like a really high AOV bundle or whatever it may be. You just kind of, I think you get lost on the message, get lost on the offer, get lost in the story for some people, not for all.
Yeah.
But I think I sidestepped a lot of that. And it saves you a bit of capital because you're only really putting all your capital into one product and testing that before you really know whether all of this works. Because if you're putting so much money into 3 to 4 different products in a line and you don't know if people are willing to even buy the one, then what do you...
Perfecting that and growing that. I think I would agree with that.
I think it also invites more conversation because we only have one product. People are more eager to be like, well, you guys should make this next. Like, you should do this next. Versus if you had 5, they'd be like, well, wait a minute. Like, I think it's a different conversation that you can kind of leap into dialogue with your customers with.
I agree with that. I want to talk a little bit about capital because you just touched on that a little bit. Going backwards a bit, you walked away from such a secure role.
Yeah.
In your job. And one of the things that really drew me to you on social media was your hook, which was walking away from a $350,000 stable career to start M.I.A.
Yeah.
What was the decision? Talk to me about that decision and what did that actually feel like in real time?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think
is it uncomfortable to talk about?
Beforehand, I think it would be. I mean, I think we all have like these. Yeah, I think talking about money has just been ingrained in us, and like from a young age, like it's a uncomfortable thing. But I think obviously I prepared myself. I come from a pretty, humble background. Like we don't like I saved a lot of my money before I left. And so I was like already like mentally prepared for the type of lifestyle I would need to live after leaving the job. And but I won't I like I'm not gonna shortcut it. Like it's disheartening. I think the money is not disheartening. It's difficult. I think money is one thing, but for me, I think a big part of it was like people that look like me don't often get those jobs, and that was a big part of like I wanted to at least do some like get someone else in the role before I left, and unfortunately I couldn't before I did leave. I think that was like the biggest barrier for me was I was like people put a lot of pressure on me to stay there because I was, the only Black woman in the firm. And a lot of Black women don't get these jobs at all. And I think that was a bigger thing than the money ever was. Although the money was really also like you get the golden handcuffs and like they treat you really well. But I think the biggest thing was I really wanted to be, I still am, like I'm still involved in private equity communities and investor communities overall. But being a representation at like a really great firm with really great people. And I think that was the biggest barrier for me.
Thank you for being like so transparent about
Yeah.
that, especially because I do agree being in these environments where you're given a really nice salary and there's
Yeah.
not a lot of us in those roles. We do feel sometimes like we have to stay in them because what other opportunities are people that look
Yeah.
like us going to have? But at the same
Especially for a beauty
time,
brand. Yeah.
yeah. And then, yeah. Are you saying like to go off and do a be as
Yeah, I mean, I
yeah.
think there's like yeah, it's like I'm leaving, software tech to build a beauty brand for people that with people in mind that look like me, and I think that just it's a very very different career path. It's a very different story. Yeah.
Did you receive that type of feedback when you told people that you were walking away, or did anyone know?
Yeah, I mean, by the end of it, people knew. I think more so it was more so like a they were no there's only one person that was like, "Are you sure?" Like like because consumer, you know how consumer is. Like it's quite literally in the name. Like people have different opinions every day. Like
Right.
there's fads that come in and go, and so I think they were more so it was like more so they just wanted to make sure that I was good in the long term. But
Yeah. Yeah. Um, did you have any fears yourself about what it could be walking away?
no, I think someone I mean, you always have fears of like it's not gonna exactly plan out how you think of it's going to be in your head.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm generally someone who I'm like, it's going to work out some one way or another. If it's not this, it's something better, you know? And I was adamant that I've known for the last 8 years since I was a freshman in college that I wanted to be, a founder. I loved beauty my whole life. And so no one has that calling for 8 years, if it's not truly meant for them. And so I think I was so confident in that and I still am. And so I guess if it's not, what we're envisioning in our head,
Yeah.
MIA and hair block is going to be so much better, for you.
Yeah. I think that when you speak of MIA and you just speak of your experience, you are very humble, which I really love about like your experiences. But one thing that I've noticed too is that all of this takes strategy. And so I don't think that any of it, like you just decided one day you were going to leave your job. One of the things that you mentioned was setting yourself up financially
Yeah.
so that you could walk away and still
Yeah.
survive and be able to have the money to make mistakes when they happen because they will. But how did you think about the financial readiness before you left? And like, what was sort of that security that you were like, okay, I'm ready to do this?
Yeah. For me, I mean, it was optimizing as much as you can. If you're in the position where you're thinking about, leaving a really good or any career, and you have the opportunity to maximize on like the 401ks, the HSAs, whatever it may be, that was kind of like priority one for me, is like making sure that that's there. And then, my modeling brain, I was kind of like, what are my expenses right now? What could be, I'm such a nerd. I could like, what could I cut out? Like, what's the minimum I could spend, living below my means? What would I need to invest in the business on a monthly basis, adding a buffer into that? And so I basically built that out and tried to give myself a year and a half to figure it out,
Yeah.
before we really started generating revenue. And so that was kind of like 6 months to launch, and then a year post launch to start being in a comfortable revenue generating place. And so that's kind of how I thought about how much money I felt comfortable building before leaving the job. And thankfully we hit that. I mean, then we left.
Yeah. So when did so you spent this time building, and when did you finally launch the business?
Yeah, I left in beginning of April 2025, and we spent about 6 months building, so doing like our first campaign, like our photo shoot for the brand. We were putting like all the bells and whistles on the final packaging, getting the production order in. I started building in public a little bit. I didn't
What
want to
does
build
that
in
mean
public.
to build in public?
Well, at that point, it was like starting like my TikTok journey,
Okay.
but I think, yeah, TikTok journey. That was like, it was kind of just like whatever was happening that week or that day. I was like, okay, new packaging coming in. Like, let me show people. And I kind of think about the whole building in public thing a bit differently now, but that was what it was at the beginning. And so, yeah, we were doing a lot of that for 6 months. And then we launched in September, doing the pre-sale, and then officially went full stream in October. And yeah, it's been like almost 7 months now. So it's been an incredible ride.
Yeah.
Right.
So now it's full-fledged, like people can go online and purchase the product.
Yes, full-fledged. We're full. So yeah, we did the soft launch. So technically September, October was a soft launch of a few hundred units, because we really just, I still wanted to test the market, because if it's not this, it's something better. And thankfully, all the strategy we put behind building the brand and the messaging resonated with people. And so we sold out of our soft launch batch, and then we did an even bigger production run. And so now we're in full-fledged mode. So you can buy on the website. We just started selling on Fair, so now it's kind of like a B2B wholesale dynamic as well.
I love that. And how much of the business now is full profit? And then how much have you earned from, like gain from different capital or funds or grants that you've applied for or anything like that?
Yeah. You mean, so you're saying like how much of the business was self-funded versus angel investor versus grants,
Yes.
things like that? Yeah, I'd say, oh, if I break it down, I'd say about 50, maybe 40% has been self-funded, 60% has been, investor dollars plus grants. And that's like angel investor, not like VC, PE dollars at that stage. But yeah, that's pretty much the split. But even even then, like a fair bit of like personal capital went into it.
How do you go about getting angel investors?
Yeah, I think my approach versus the approach I would recommend to other people is different, because I was in the investor world, albeit on a whole different industry. Before I left Toma, I actually got involved in an angel investor group. So I started angel investing. It's called First Look Ventures, or First Look is the box. And so I was like, I'm just really interested in consumer. I want to start consumer investing. I played around a little bit with like publics and did really well with public investing. Yeah, it's just like I love testing like a thesis and then the public markets. And so the next step for me was like, if I really love, that was consumer tech, but if I really love consumer, I'm getting in on these deals really early on. And so I joined that group, and you have to be an institutional investor to join groups like that. That's why I don't recommend it for other people unless they aren't institutional investors or accredited investors. And so that was kind of how I got connected to like the consumer investor world. And from there on, you can kind of leverage like there's like events that they kind of talk about within their communities. And but if I'd say if someone else wants to get connected with angel investors and consumer, hit me up. They're
Yeah.
always looking for, other businesses to invest in. And so getting a recommendation from someone in the group always helps. And also I think they're trying to make, like, for example, 1752 VC, it used to be Pegasus VC. There are these venture capital accelerators that are trying to make consumer a bit more accessible. And so they have this like D2C accelerator program, which if you go through it, then you get feedback from them directly, and they kind of make it a little bit more easier to get into their, I think it's they give you like 100K investment, and then they also connect you to other VCs within consumer. It's more LA focused,
Yeah.
and that will, sorry, I'm being specific, and that will connect you to more investors to give you more capital. But yeah, I'd say like really, if you don't have like a direct connection to a group, like pinging people like on LinkedIn like really helps. Like I would just get like LinkedIn messages from founders that wanted to like pitch their brand to me, and I would just hop on the phone. And I don't think there's, unless they're super super busy, I think most angel investors are a little bit more receptive to founder input versus the institutional VCs and Ps.
Stay tuned. When we return, Jordan and I get into how to build relationships with investors. That's interesting because I think that people that are listening right now, one of the things everyone knows that VCs are out there, everyone knows angel investors are out there. I think one of the drawbacks, though, is how do you know what you're looking for? How do you know who to go after and who to like try to pitch
Yeah.
to?
I think it's what's your long-term goal? Like if you want to keep this, like make this business, keep it small, and small is so subjective, but keep it reasonably, like you can pay, basically you can pay yourself a living wage, pay a few employees. Honestly, consider bootstrapping. It's hard. Consider, local bank funded debt, which is just like a reasonable rate, and they have better timelines, better terms. And then the last thing I'd say is consider an angel investor. Like they're essentially just, high net worth individuals who really believe in you and the mission. But if you're like, I think if you take on any investor cap or outside of angel investors, friends and family, it's perfect, or crowdfunding is also really a good option, the Kickstarters of the world. If you take on like really high net worth individuals, angel investors, VCs, Ps, you just got to be ready to, exit one day. That's how you ultimately give people a return or outsized return.
If someone is starting today, do you think they should even aim for VCs or should they start with friends and family and crowdfunding?
I would say yes. I'd say start with friends and family. Crowdfundings, I haven't done it personally. I have seen other founders do it and they like it. It's just a lot of, like, you have so much going on in crowdfunding, it's just a lot of back end work. Friends and family, I think, is a little bit more manageable. But if you get like an angel investor, like one that like can write a pretty decent sized check, believes in you, that's a lot less to manage than like 20, 30, 40 of your friends and family, but they likely won't have as like nitty-gritty questions as an angel investor will. But
So,
I definitely would recommend starting small and going off for a VC, because your strategic vision, like I think from the get-go, kind of gets sidestepped to a certain extent. You also define, all capital isn't good capital or aligned capital. And so finding the people who, believe in the vision, and that's truly what angel investors are. They believe in what you're putting forward.
yeah, I feel like a lot of times in entrepreneurship, you don't know what you don't know. And so,
Yeah.
what are some of that you've seen, some of the biggest blind spots you see with new entrepreneurs?
Yeah. And I'm kind of going through it right now. I think some of the biggest blind spots, and even my own blind spot, is kind of thinking that whatever you see or go through is kind of going to be your long-term solution. I'll give an example. Like when we first launched, we had an amazing designer. We did our packaging that was kind of just optimized for, e-com, which like it looks really great when it shows up to your house. But and that's because that's all I was kind of showed or guided towards online, or what's typically available. It's like make sure your packaging is aesthetic and it's storytelling and fits into your brand world. But when you kind of transition over to even like niche retail or specialty boutiques, you really have to ensure that your packaging is like such a that's another buzzword, retail ready, you know?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
so vague and it means so many different things for different industries, and people try to group CPG all together, but CPG beauty and CPG food and beverage is so, so different. And so I think that's like a blind spot that a lot of founders have. It's that whatever you see is kind of what you get, but you kind of have to like pull behind the curtain. It's like, okay, if I make this decision, and you don't really know until you know, but if I make this decision, how will I have to then like course correct and then redo our packaging for retail? And sometimes you got to bite the cost. But
Yeah. Have there been situations like that for you? Like mistakes that you made that you have now overcome, but you didn't know prior?
yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. I think a lot on the packaging front. I mean, we play in like a really interesting world because we do have like UV, like real UV actives in our products. So we have to be really intentional about what we say on our packaging,
Mm.
the labeling, FDA regulation. And so ensuring that was kind of like my main focus. Like I was so like I kind of got like little tunnel vision. I'm like regulation, like I want to make sure like there's nothing, which is good, you know?
Yeah.
But then you kind of have every other like nut and bolt between getting someone to actually like buy your packaging and so or buy your product. And so that's something that I'm constantly like iterating on, and messaging, offering, and offers are iterative process. So it's
Yeah.
you gotta figure it out.
I would love to know too, like how, you're talking about packaging, you're talking about sort of the science behind the product too, and the credibility behind the business. How can we make our brands look more credible to investors?
Yeah, that's a good question. You mean on like out packaging only or
Just in
in
general,
general?
like, yeah, in general.
Yeah. I'd say making a brand more credible. I think we talked about this a little bit a few weeks ago about how beauty is just so different than every other aspect of consumer to an angel
Mhm.
investor.
Okay.
And so I think to establish some sense of credibility, you really have to have, and it sucks, so it's like you really don't have backing until you're in the industry. A if you're a founder that kind of leaped over into a new space. And so having like advisors, or they don't have to be paid, but like or give them equity. They sometimes say people will just mentor or advise you. That
Yeah.
like really boosts credibility. Um, like if you, for example, are like a coffee business and you can get someone who's like directly like a retired founder or someone who has years of experience in the business backing you, or getting into like an accelerator or something like that, I think adds additional credibility because someone else has kind of validated that they're behind you and that they're advising you on this crazy space.
I love that you're kind of giving like subtle ways that founders can increase their perceived value before they even have traction, because you're right. Like before they even are out in the market and people even know about them, like how can they sort of market themselves to investors to get that growth?
Yeah, because it's really you really only are, especially when you're so early, like if you're pre-revenue or even like early stages of revenue, they really have the founder to go off of. So if you don't have, I mean, outside of your own personal background, kind of speaking for itself, like how hard you work, how aligned you are, like getting the why you question is quite frequent.
Hmm.
So having someone else kind of back you, and you have that institutional knowledge is really important. So yeah, I think that's kind of the core of what when I'm like in sessions with other angel investors, like, okay, so and so was working with and so they're really believable. Like you can believe and you can trust their not only their work ethic, but you can trust that they are going to make the right decisions, because that's make or break. Like, again,
Yeah.
going back to it, like making the right decisions is kind of determinant of how efficient they're going to be with your capital. And so if you have a founder who is kind of figuring out beauty, consumer food and beverage on their own, they're going to make a lot more stakes than if they have someone who's been in the industry for 10, 20 years.
What separates founders who get funded from those who don't?
That's a good question. I'd say, I mean, there's so many different things, and every investor, especially at the angel side, is so different. Even private equity, it's every investor has their thing.
Yeah.
But I would say I would standardize it. I think what separates people from who get founded and funded and don't get funded, um, outside of like early traction, like you can prove that people are buying your product or solution or service and you have solid retention. Retention is like a really big thing outside of growth because there's so many dynamics with profitability in the long term. If you can retain a customer, it's a lot cheaper than having to acquire a new customer. And so I think, yeah, good financials really set you apart. It's so hard early on though, especially when you're getting an angel investor. Good strong backing, and I'd say, yeah, past career is really important. Like, is this the right person to be leading the charge here?
Yeah.
If they don't have direct experience, what have they done in the meantime to do it, or who do they know that can? And also, like, I think planning. Like, I think I get into conversations often with advisors and angel investors, and I think it's oftentimes people are like, "Wow, you really have like this planned out," and I'm like, I'm just so shocked to hear that there aren't a lot of people who aren't thinking about, what does the next 3 to 5 years, 10 years look like, and
Right.
how does our strategy in the next year kinda get us there? I think so being super intentional about what your next steps look like is, I think, refreshing to a lot of investors.
Those are all great tips. And I think one of the things you and I talked about last time was navigating funding as a Black woman. And like you are a Black woman that fortunately has had a background in VC, but there's so many Black entrepreneurs, women, especially as we know the statistics that less than 1% of Black women receive VC funding, but you've approached it very strategically. Like, what do you think you've done differently that other Black founders can learn from?
Yeah, and I think it's the fallout from the nature of our product because there's so much education that's required even just for building this brand. And so when we talked about it a few weeks ago, I was just so, and I still am adamant about, and people can disagree, that the reason why at least Black women and don't get a lot of funding is because I think a lot of Black women or women of color tend to be in beauty, at least some from the founders that I know, do a lot of beauty brands. And from my few years being an angel investor, I don't think a lot of angel investors, are super well versed in beauty. I think they know a lot about food and beverage. They know a lot about personal care, even like a cleaning product. I think they know a lot about
Yeah.
that side of the world. I think because of the attention, like the Rogue acquisition, you have the vacation just got an investment a few days ago. I think is a lot there's a lot going on in beauty and wellness right now that wasn't happening previously, which is making more angel investors, interested and excited in beauty and wellness. But I'll get constant messages of like people saying like, does anyone know beauty? Like, can I like ask you a few questions? Like, do you know about beauty? And so I think that on the more lower level of funding, like not lower level, but like the starter level of like angel investors, that barrier is there because not a lot of angel investors know. And at that level, having a really strategic investor is so crucial because, of course, like capital is great, but you would really love a capital investor who can be a strategic mind with you, bounce ideas off of it with you. And if an investor doesn't really understand your business model, they don't understand your product, they don't understand what you're building. And a lot of angel investors are white men and they don't understand curls, coils, and waves.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to get funding at the angel investor level if they don't have that lived experience. So that's why you need to like put a lot of effort into education and like really breaking it down and in some ways like making the product relate to them or someone they have in their life. And it's all about personalizing everything in this business. I feel like it's a people business, so making the person invited into the story.
When you were talking, I was thinking and I was like, okay, beauty. When I think about beauty, yes, there's like the scientific element to it. So education is key, but also when you have investors and no one else in the room looks like you, how would they know? How would they know how these products are supposed to work?
And that reminded me, like, data. Like, I think there are a ton of investors that, like, even if they're like, I don't have this issue, if you show them the data, they'd be like, wait a minute, like this something's there, and the numbers don't lie. So if they're, I think that's something that we did as well. We went and surveyed a ton of people to ensure that we could, I mean, it's one thing for someone to say like, yeah, I'd pay for this, and this is how much I would pay. So that only gets you so far through the door. But I think having the data really, really makes someone understand your perspective.
How can someone who's just starting, who doesn't have many connections, build them?
Yeah. And I think LinkedIn's a great place, and you get a lot of no's, or you get a lot of silence. But I think people like me and a lot of young get them while they're young. I think people are excited to help and be a part of the conversation and make a connection. Like I'm like, for anyone listening, like if you're in consumer and you're curious about angel investing, like I'm down to chat, and if it makes sense, then make a connection to the person who runs the program. But
Yeah.
I think outside of that, like networking, like we went to a lot of trade shows and conferences in the first year because you never know who you're going to meet. And we made so many, it's in the future that's coming up, but we made so many good connections there. And I think that's like showing up, even when you're not like tabling or presenting, is so important.
One, I want to touch on that, but I have one more question just as it relates to the Black women in funding. But what is like, do you know of any like mindset shifts that Black women founders need when it comes to raising money? Like, what are we not doing that we could be doing more?
That's a good question. That's a really good question. I would say for Black women, what are they not doing that they should be doing more? Perhaps looking at, and maybe they are doing this, but like perhaps looking at past smaller deals, like under 5 million, under $1 million raised, and using that as like a case study for like doing more targeted research. Because I think you can kind of get like, for lack of better words, like winded or gassed out by like the spray and pray method. I think being super targeted with your outreach and even utilizing that as a like, hey, I noticed you invested in this person. Just like we're in an adjacent field and we have X, Y, and Z traction. I think that kind of piques people's interest. And last year before I even left my private equity job, I just randomly cold emailed like a partner at Prelude Growth Partners. Probably shouldn't have, but I did, and she said yes to the call, and I watched 2 podcasts. The only podcast she had available, I watched those or listened to those. I read every article that was, publicly available on her, and I had questions. I was ready to go, and I think that really, I think just doing research, even for those like small conversations that don't go anywhere in that moment, but like who's to say we won't do a deal, in 5-10 years? So
Yeah.
I think
And just keeping in touch with those people as well.
yeah, at the end of the conversation being like, I love to keep you, like you said, I'd love to keep you in touch on like our progress. And she's like, 100%, and taking every moment to tell someone what you're doing. I think Black women and women in general are just so shy. And I'm shy too about like sharing the good stuff that's happening in our lives. And I think taking every moment to be like, oh yeah, I'm the founder CEO of this brand. We make this. So if you know anyone, like, let me know. Here's our website.
Totally. Yeah. Pumping our chests a little more. It's like humble. It's like confident, but humble at the same time. Yeah. I love that. One thing that I want to mention, you said this in our earlier conversation that I think might surprise listeners, competition. And what we were talking about was being in rooms where people are that you don't realize could end up funding your business long term rather than just going for like the low hanging fruit. For example, that $20,000 pitch competition. I wanted to know if you could like expand upon that because I thought that was such a genius strategy.
Yeah, and it's different work, I think founders need for the pitch versus like the money networking conversation. Like founders need to know like their strengths and weaknesses. And for me, maybe one day I'll build up to being like the Shark Tank founder. Like that can be like we're MIAing, we're selling our company for 10% equity, but
Yeah.
that's just like, I know where I excel, and it's in those rooms. And I think that that type of strategy to getting funded is a bit more nuanced because you're not necessarily there to be funded, if that makes sense. So the pressure on the conversation is a bit different. And I think conversations can evolve from there. So you have like a maybe a set organized conversation or a set organized event that people are just organically getting to know you, and you can kind of utilize that to plug your business. I think conversations evolve from there. I think people like supporting and being more intentional about the investments they make in those kind of spaces. That's what you
How,
mean.
yeah, no, that's exactly what I mean. And how can you turn a casual conversation in one of those rooms into an investment opportunity later on?
Yeah, definitely following up. Well, at the start, like getting like super crystal clear of like what are the key points. And I mean that's kind of how I prepared for like investment banking and private equity. These like it's like ingrained in us. What are like the 60 seconds? Like if you were in an elevator with someone, how would
Right.
you pitch them on your brand? And so I was just super ingrained in like what are our three like early traction indicators, what are the three market indicators, and obviously not like iterating them in like a robotic way, but like introducing them organically into conversation where you're kind of like educating the person conversationally, where they're like, "Oh, I didn't know that," and they want to learn more. So you send up a follow up email after that, or you like having a coffee chat. Like people don't underestimate like the power of a good coffee chat. Like send like 20 minutes in person. And again, don't be shy about your background and the vision that you see for the brand and what you would utilize the capital for. Like having all of that ready. I think that gets people really excited about turning like a casual encounter to something that's long term.
Can you talk a little bit about one thing that we were discussing was you used an example of like a coffee company. Let's say you work for a coffee company, you go into one of these networking events that's not a pitch competition, but just so that you can meet people and form connections. And let's just say Starbucks is in the room. How, and then you sort of build this relationship with whomever that is at Starbucks. How can having someone like them backing your product help you with angel investors or VCs down the line?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, it's like the industry knowledge is so unique. So like the credibility is there. So having someone who's reputable, knows the space is really strong. And I think also like the partnerships and the partnerships is a really important dynamic. So if you have a coffee brand, Starbucks's venture capital arm is invested in you. You not only get their advisors and their strategic analysts, you kind of also get engulfed into their manufacturing processes, their vendor ecosystem, and so you get better rates on deals. And so I think that's like um, super helpful for a business as they scale.
Yeah.
But I think before that, like the credibility is a really important part of it. And then the economics of it all. Because you want to be profitable in the end. You want to be
No.
profitable.
Absolutely. I want to get back to building your brand for a second. M.I.A. You made a very intentional decision not to only market to Black women, even though that's your core audience. What went into that?
Yeah. When we first started building a hair block in particular, I was just doing a ton of research on, like I said, what was available in like the clean, research back and high quality, like this premium but like accessible space. And we sent out a lot of our testers to friends that like had curls, coils, and waves. And then I was like, well, let me just see what my friends with like, type 1, type 2, like the straighter, like with a little bit of curl in it, like what they would say, like how they feel about the product. So I think for on the usability front, like that was kind of like a no-brainer where I was like, well, they can use it too. Like there's no reason for these products to be, not all inclusive, because there really isn't a solution that kind of sits in this like sun care, this like premium sun care, but also intentionally made and non-toxic
Yeah.
space. And so that's kind of why, like, and why also like not invite people into the conversation. And I think the other part of it is like, you know, I think as we get deeper into hair care and as hair care grows, so many women of color and Black women like utilize, non-Black owned brands, and they participate in like the whole entire hair care ecosystem. And so
Yes.
why not, open my brand to people that could really, utilize and enjoy it. And if our ultimate mission, is to truly create better, more frequent outdoor experiences, then that's not exclusive to any type of hair. It's the amount of product that you use will be different. And the way you use the product will be different. And we educate that on the website and in our email flows. But
Yeah.
it's just, yeah. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, and I would love to know, how do you balance still being culturally specific while broadly appealing at the same
Yeah.
time?
I mean, I think just an essence of like who I am is like so cultural, like my story, and
Yeah.
telling
Yeah.
people like I was on the beach in San Diego with my twists in, it's so cultural, and that will never leave me. I think the part that gets tricky and we're figuring out that as we scale, like how if I'm not a part of every touch point, then how does that story kind of get told? Because for example, we did my first partnership. We did it really early. Like it was before we even launched the brand, we did like a partnership with Soho House, and we just like kind of put the product in people's rooms. It was in their campers. It was like Camp Soho retreat, and every Black woman was like, their immediate thought was like, this is not for me. Like, this is not a product like I like was made for me in mind. And then they had me like stand up and like give an introduction of M.I.A, and they were like, this might be for me, And so I think being super intentional with like making sure our marketing just spells out which it kind of gets a little wary. Like when you say like all hair types, I think in the back of people's mind, it's like, is that really for me? Or is that just like someone really trying to get an extra dollar out of me? And so being super intentional about like inserts and like QR codes, like people can like really be educated in that space. And it's still a journey that we're still on. But I think even in our campaigns, like making sure they're as, all inclusive as possible. And in the messaging that we use for our copy, I think it falls into everything, that you really have to be super intentional about it.
I love that. And I love that you're kind of a perfect segue into the marketing. When it comes to customer acquisition today and marketing, it can be expensive to constantly, and it's also constantly changing. Like, how do you decide where to invest your time and money when it comes to marketing?
Such a good question. You mean at the early stages or right now? Or both?
Both, actually. That would be great.
Yeah, at the early stages, you really, because you're kind of starting with a blank canvas. And that's kind of what we try to just formulate a budget of like, what could we test and what for makes sense at the beginning. I kind of segment marketing, and people think about it differently. Like you obviously have your paid marketing, your organic marketing. Really, that's kind of how I segment it. And like paid can be like PR and digital advertising and whatnot. I'm not a formal marketer. That's how my founder brain kind of works.
Yeah.
Um, I for like stop taking a step back. I was like, what sequentially like follows the other? And for me, like things like this, like organic PR kind of follows exposure. And if we kind of get the exposure through organic and paid media, then other parts of PR may follow suit, or like pop-ups are another part of marketing that we're just now starting to explore this summer. And so that's another expenditure on our budget. But early on, kind of going back to like my PE mindset, I was so hyper focused on sustainable, repeatable, get into software. It's like recurring revenue. And so I was,
Yeah.
how can we create a scalable recurring revenue system, and that can survive when I like have other priorities, and can't really be building in public all the time, or creating organic content. And that's unfortunately that's paid media. Not unfortunately, but that is paid media. People
Okay.
don't like spending money to make money, but paid media it's a risk, and it's a process. It takes a lot of money to get data and to figure out what works. But there's so many avenues like Google, you have Meta, and I think it's just like putting capital like at the start. I'd probably focus on those two to start. Those are
Okay.
like the Google you have that like captures current demand, and you'll have Meta that like is the demand creator side of it. But we kind of thought of like that as a pretty even split at the beginning, and then you kind of can scale Meta more than you can Google because you can only capture so much demand with Google. You really have to then start creating demand. And then now, it's kind of getting into like the Meta side of it. Now, as we think about the next phase of growth, it's like maybe we should start showing up, in public and cultivate a real community and a real brand role because you can't always do that online. And it really comes to life when you can do pop-ups and interact with customers and get real-time feedback. Obviously Meta will scale more than Google can. And then at some point we'd probably trickle in like other alternative media spend, like the Pinterests of the world. And we've talked with Reddit, and that's a world that we maybe will explore at some point.
Yeah.
They're doing a bit of, they just started paid media, I think in the last 2 years. And so they're a pretty new digital advertiser. Even like promotional spending, like when's the right time to like buy samples and start doing sampling, which I think we probably should have done earlier on. We didn't do a ton of sampling. Yeah, we didn't do a ton of sampling just because of the type of product we built. But I know that there are founders that started right off the bat giving samples, and I don't know I don't know if I'm still undecided of how to sample in the right way.
Yeah.
I haven't heard the best thing about it, but you have to be super intentional about who you're giving samples to. I think that's
Right.
always a process.
And like there's so many like experimental marketing events and like programs that you can be out at, but again, it's like the data collection of like how many people you're actually giving these samples to that are going to then go on your website and purchase. Yeah.
Ask about like if anyone's asking you to sample or table, like ask like what are your demographics?
Yeah.
What's the payoff, like the historical payoff? Because it's crazy what people will just ask for without really thinking about the business in mind. Like they will just ask you, "Can I have 1,000 samples for our sorority event?" And I'm like, "Are they gonna? Is that really aligned with us right now?" And you don't really know until you're out $1,000 of samples.
I'm so glad you brought that up, and that's such a great thing to think about. Again, I found you on social media, so you were doing something right because I found you. Do you believe that TikTok and Instagram are still worth it for early brands?
Yeah, I definitely do. I think it's obviously expensive, and you just have to be always iterating and trying to beat the system, for a lack of better words. There's always a new way to kind of position your brand, position your offering. And I think as CAC gets higher, like you just got to get more creative. But if you're in the early stages, I've heard TikTok is better for discovery.
Okay.
We haven't done any paid media on TikTok just yet, but I think that's a little blown out of proportion. We explored it a little bit with like TikTok affiliate. To even get like strong results, you just need so much volume. A lot of these brands are doing really well on TikTok Shop and TikTok paid media. They're giving out like thousands and thousands of samples a month. So you really need this, you need the inventory. So it's not really like small business sustainable at the beginning. I think it's a better, and that's like the whole like widespread like micro influencer TikTok strategy, a TikTok affiliate strategy.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of better payoff from just like building in public and like having your like TikTok box, or like being really intentional, having like 10 founders or 10 influencers that are really aligned and like working really intently with them.
That's awesome. What has been the most surprising growth channel for you?
Yeah, when I first started, I thought Meta was gonna be our end all be all. But it's Google. I mean, Google, you're just capturing intent. But again, there's like only so much space you can kind of grow with Google. But you'd be surprised how many people, when we started our pitch deck, a lot of founders and like we did, and they'll put like search queries in their like why now section, because like to say like, oh, like searches for this have gone up 300-500% in the last year, 2 years is a good signal for investors. And so that was, I wasn't even thinking Google in my brain. I feel like when you're taught like marketing principles, they like kind of push you towards Meta first because that's the most scalable or most scalable channel. But I think Google has been a really cool, and it's a lot less demanding. Like you don't have to have as many creatives or iterative creatives out there. And you can kind of test in different campaigns and optimize on the one that works really well for your brand. So Google has been a really cool avenue for us.
Do you
And
think
they
that
incentivize.
and they incentivize as well? Is that what you said?
Yeah, for beginners, for early stage brands.
Do you think that founders should focus on one platform or diversify early?
One platform, yeah. And I think that's, even I fell victim to it. You kind of want to go like 10 inches deep in one area. Just focus. Yeah, focus on one thing that, unless it's really not working.
Yeah.
Like if your bread and butter is like PR, like you're putting all your money into PR and you're like, wait, this is not paying off. Like these like ad placements or these magazine placements aren't paying off, then maybe you should divert. But it just really takes so much time. And if you really give it the time of day to optimize and you're really owning it yourself, I think giving it to an agency too early when you yourself don't know the exact, offer, the exact messaging that you can use to scale, I think that is something that you just have to spend so much time with. So pick one channel that you know has potential, and it's hard to do that, but I think Meta and Google are a good place to start. I'd even start with, for me, in my brain, I think Google is a great place to be like, is there existing demand? And if there is existing demand from search queries, then you can then create demand from that, because you can kind of test like which campaign is doing well, and then use that to translate off to the offer on
I love that. This has been such a great wealth of knowledge just from the
Hopefully.
start. Yeah, no, just from like the start of your business and all the things that go behind the scenes that founders don't really get the chance to really dive into. I think that people that are listening today can really take so many great tidbits from you. I have like 2 more questions for you, just tying it back to the brand. But looking back, what was the real aha moment for you? And like the point where this went from the concept to something that you knew you had to pursue. What do you hope that listeners can take away from your story?
Yeah, to answer your first part of your question, I'd say maybe the real aha moment was about 6 to 10 months prior to me actually leaving my career in finance. I went on this like solo trip to Hawaii, which is like right near California. And I was at the point where I was like still pretty shy about my brand idea, even in like those communities of people who were like, if you're solo traveling, we pretty much are like my target market. And then I just brought up that I was like, yeah, I'm building this brand in the background, and I didn't even have to say anything. They were just like, and I have the scalp burn and my hair so, and I just like, they went off for like 10, 15 minutes. I was like, okay, this is something. I think that was like another aha moment. When your customer can articulate the issue, better than you, and the frustration, and I think that was a really cool moment where I was like, I got to put in my week's notice soon.
Yes.
Yeah. And then remind
that.
me of your second question.
Yeah. What is one idea of a mindset switch or shift that you hope listeners can take away from your story?
Oof. Good question. A mindset shift that I hope people can take away from this story is that it's okay to perhaps it's okay to like build evidence to justify, a change in your life. And I think in many ways, building that evidence not only gives you the confidence, but then it becomes like the backbone for everything else you do. Like everything that I did prior to building M.I.A, or prior to being like, okay, I should really go for this, is now all in our pitch deck. It's like, it's the data that like we use to like back up our market stats. It's the reason why we formulated it in such intentional ways. I think building that like auxiliary, I think is the word, or like building that like that system really solidifies the journey for your brand, and it helps you articulate the offer, helps you answer questions with future investors. And so there are so many things that didn't prepare going into an investor meeting, but I just knew because of how much time I had put into thinking about building this brand and what it would mean, and getting like the right people involved. And I think people want to be 100% sure, but you're never going to be 100% sure about, leaving a really great career and not being sure about the outcome.
Yeah. I think that was the perfect way to end. No, I loved that. Where can people find you and support M.I.A?
Yeah, you can find me and MIA on Instagram and TikTok. My Instagram's all my socials at Jordan is MIA, and we're at the brand is MIA on all of our socials. Or follow me on LinkedIn and we can chat.
I love that. Jordan, this has been so great. Like your knowledge and your passion and your drive is really, I think,
Thank you. I
just
appreciate it.
exudes in this interview. And we've never had someone on the show that we've had investors on the show, but never in this level of education that you just provided. And I think people will really walk away with just great advice and inspiration to go out and start their business or to go seek capital. So thank you so much for your time.
I love that. I appreciate that. I mean, I had so much fun. I love doing stuff like this. So
It's great.
whatever you need, I'm here.
Yay. We'll stay in touch for sure. That's it for this week's episode of A Bright Idea podcast. This week's episode featured Jordan Polk, founder and CEO of Missing in Action. If you would like to support Missing in Action, you can follow the brand on Instagram at @thebrandismia. Jordan would also love to connect with more founders who are looking for investors or advice on how to find funding. You can connect with her on LinkedIn by searching Jordan Polk. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us bring on more stories like Jordan's. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at A Bright Idea Podcast for updates. And if there's a topic or a guest you'd like to hear from next, drop us a message. If you would like to support our show directly, you can donate to our Cash App at A Bright Idea Podcast. This episode was edited by Quincy Tucker. And until next time, I'm Amber Key.